Obviously, I'm not Jen Eller, and she wasn't able to make it, so I would like to welcome you all to the meeting of the Nantucket School Committee for the evening of February 7th. You have before you an agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? And I will tell you that we are going to have one change in it. The snack folks are not going to be able to make it, so that will be...
We'll reschedule.
Reschedule that.
Yeah.
So can I have a motion to...
So moved.
All in favor? Anybody opposed? No. Okay. Martin, you're up.
Hi, Lawson.
How are you?
Good.
Good evening. So, first quarter, the second quarter update sees us percentage-wise, we are very close to last year. So there is nothing unexpected on the school side. As you have seen from the packet, 47% of budget has been committed, as opposed to 48 last year. 38 versus 39 on the payroll side. So we've looked through the expenses. If you look through the reports, you'll see that everything is percentage-wise where it should be at this point in the year. There haven't been any unanticipated expenses so far. Utilities, I did review, because I remember last year there were questions about utilities, and we were actually reviewing them today with Diane, and Michelle helped out. Electricity, water, sewer are mostly on par with last year. Now, fuel oil this year has increased. The price per gallon has increased. Last year it was $1.70 in the winter months, more or less, and this year it has fluctuated between $2.05 in the summer months at the beginning of the year, up until $2.35 now in the winter. So this, plus I would assume the addition of the 6 classrooms to CPS has led to increased usage, and that combined with the price has seen fuel expenses increase this year in comparison to last year. So that is for the school side of note, what I saw going through the budget comparing and the expenditures so far. For the community school, revenues are up around $8,000 from program revenue and donations. I say that because it's $123,000, but as I mentioned in the first quarter presentation, $115,000 is increased appropriation from the town. Expenses have increased by a little over $113,000. The unusual expense this year that we had was the $26,000 purchase of a driver's ed vehicle, and there is an increase in encumbrances as well. Now, if you look at the budget that I sent, you'll see that revenues compared to expenses, revenues are around $200,000 more. But I want to make a note. We've had discussions with Caitlin and also with the finance department of the town as to how to apply the health insurance premium expense. Those for the community school employees total $150,000, and while roughly $150,000, and while the school employees are covered on the town side, with the community school they are applied to their budget, to the separate revolving accounts. The discussions so far have left it as it has been done in prior years, which is through a journal entry at the end of the year. Once the total amounts are known, we journal out the expenses from the town side to the community school. So I'm just making you aware of this. It's gonna happen in the fourth quarter. It's $150,000 expense that we know will be there. So revenues compared to expenses, if you look at it this way, are about $50,000 difference at this point. That's at the end of the second quarter. Yes.
Hi, sorry. Is there any way to work with the town to get that quarterly? So when we have the quarterly updates, at least for a prior quarter, we could have a sense of gauging where we're at, or is that?
Yes, that's a great question. That's what started the discussion. Preferably it would be done on a bi-weekly basis with the payroll. Much like a person, and I know on the town side there are people that percentage of salaries are applied to different revolving accounts. That's how they're set up, and the check comes out of different accounts. Much like in the same fashion, they can do the health insurance premiums, but it's a lot of work to set it up. And I think right now the focus on the finance department side is obviously the warrant town meeting.
Yeah.
I expect to work with the finance office, though, after town meeting is done, to see whether we can do that for the next fiscal year.
That would be really helpful, I think, to gauge that in a more real time.
Yeah, because if
Why?
it's done, I mean, the first year it's gonna be slightly off when we're comparing the numbers, because it's gonna be happening as we go, while in, obviously, this year and prior years, it has happened at the end of the year. But then going forward from that, we'll have a much more realistic picture of the expenses in real time.
Excellent.
The other new thing, obviously, for the community school was waivers. As you're all aware, the program has been run since middle of October, and the community school director and her staff have done an amazing job. I mean, it's a service to the community that benefits a lot of families, and the community school and the school has stepped in, and they've done a great job. We have 32 kids, or had 32 kids at that particular point in time at the end of December. Now there are 34 kids enrolled in the program, and it's been successful. You can see from the revenue compared to the expense picture that revenues were a little over $81,000 and expenses were a little over almost 71,000. Right now they're about even. I just checked today. As of today, expenses and revenues are at about an even point. There's been, obviously, we want to recognize generous donations. Two of them you have in the packet today for approval later on. So the whole community has been extremely supportive in that. The school lunch program, it's the first time I've seen a operating profit showing. At the end of December, we had a little over $15,000. I have to give a lot of credit to the food service director, Linda Peterson, the district manager, Erin Long, with which we work closely. They've done a great job, both with inventory, menu offerings, and outreach. The free and reduced, dramatic increase continues, 37% compared to 23.
Wow.
Just for the month of December, 49.6% of the total meals served in the two cafeterias were free and reduced.
Say that again, please.
Just for the month of December, because this 37% is for the whole quarter.
Right.
But just the month of December, 49.6% of the meals served were free and reduced. So it's big. It's bringing in the federal reimbursements are up, obviously, and that's causing the additional revenues that you see. Meals served were a little over 81,000 compared to 62,955 last year. There were 4 more days of operation, and also there is just increased participation in the program.
That's fabulous.
So, and the sales per day, I like to look at this metric. I don't know, I think it's beneficial. Have increased $665 per day.
Excellent.
Just to remind, we have a little over $55,000 budgeted subsidy. We're extremely hopeful that we'll come under it, even break even maybe. I mean, would be a great thing. The request for proposals for the food service program is now live. It's gone out in the Goods and Services Bulletin. I got a lot of help from Diane with that, so we're starting to get some emails with questions, and we'll see who will bid on the program.
Great.
As you are aware, the contract of Chartwell ends with this
Right.
fiscal year. So
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I haven't been in the position of being a superintendent with the food in the positive at any quarter. That is pretty remarkable that's happened, and I think they're doing certainly a great job identifying people who need help with a free and reduced. I think Linda Peterson gets credit, but also Sarah Erickson has worked, and her ability to speak Spanish has helped reach out to that community as well, and so it's really a positive.
And you know that this is something a lot of districts struggle with on our list that we're on for Mass. It's been actually a recent topic of conversation on lunch programs and how districts have helped reduce the deficit, so I think it's something that schools are struggling with. Dare we go back and tell them our good news?
Maybe we want to
No.
keep that to ourselves.
No.
A little bit.
It could be timing. We don't know yet. We gotta
Right.
see next month as they
Yeah.
come. I'm waiting from Linda to give me the January report and invoice, so we do these monthly with her. We'll see how
Excellent.
it goes.
I love the 37% of free and reduced. I mean, I remember the days when it was 8%. And we knew we weren't reaching the student body, but that was the best that we could do. So that 37% is pretty phenomenal.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
How about the amount of fuel oil that we've used this year?
We haven't, I didn't go into details with the exact amounts, the gallons, but we can do that, and I'll get back to you.
I was just
by the end
curious.
of
I
the
mean,
week.
I understand the increase in cost, but I wonder, it's sort of been a warm winter.
Yeah, last year was 2. We were just talking this today. I would research it and get back by the end of the week.
Zona, any questions? Anybody else?
Thank you,
Okay,
Martin.
thank you very much,
Thank
Mark.
you, Martin.
Thanks, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the homework discussion. And I believe
I think John's going to come up, but I'm going to give a little preface to the homework discussion. And I guess I would say that in my 40-plus years of education, I've experienced the angst of that homework has created for students, parents, teachers, and administrators, and probably from each of those perspectives. Our conversation on this issue tonight is not unusual. It often surfaces every 3 to 5 years in a school district. School districts around the Commonwealth and around the country deal with this issue, and it's not an unnecessary conversation either. I think it's a good conversation for a school and school community to have. It is, however, very challenging conversation. And I think it's challenging because for every argument in favor of homework, there is a counter argument against it, and vice versa. There are lots of valid reasons for homework, and there are just as many valid reasons that one might not support homework. Personally, I don't think homework is bad, but I think that there have been some bad homework assignments that give homework a bad name. And I think educators better understand the issue of quality versus quantity. Certainly when I was growing up, it was all about quantity. And I think that there is probably a far better balance. By bad homework, what do I mean? 60 math problems when 5 would show that you know how to do something. Too long, too confusing, it counted too much, it didn't count at all. Those are all the issues that that you'll find when you go into this. I think the argument should not be about whether to have homework or not, but how to make homework meaningful if and when it is given. That's personal. There are people who would take up that argument about whether any is appropriate, and I understand that. I have given, in leading up to tonight, a copy of the policy and the procedures to the school committee, just to remind you of what we have. What we have is not unlike what most districts have. It gives parameters. It talks about the responsibilities of the roles and responsibilities of the student, roles and responsibilities of the teacher and of the administrator, and of the parent. and I think that that's appropriate. It also gives guidelines on allocation of time, but I want to be very clear that those are guidelines and are very hard to apply, because in your classroom you will have one child who can do an assignment in 15 minutes, and that same assignment for another child could take 30 minutes or 45 minutes. So allocations of time can be a little misleading. And I caution people not to get too in love with them. And it depends on the course. What I thought we would do tonight, though, is have each of the principals come up, talk about how they see homework and homework in their school, and then, any questions, at any point, I think you should feel free to, with the chair's approval, to raise the question. So I don't know if you have any questions of me at this point, but if not, I'll turn it over to John, and then we'll follow John with Peter and then Kim, if that's appropriate.
We had a conversation at the faculty meeting today about this, about homework, and I solicited input from faculty. What is it that you want me to talk to school committee about a conversation regarding homework? And I think one of the first things for me is it's incredibly complicated at the high school because we have different levels of courses, and the expectations within those courses are different. So a student in a college prep class might have less homework than a student in an honors class, who has less homework than a student in an advanced placement course. And so the label of homework also then becomes complicated, because if a world language teacher, as I was, assigns a project and gives students 2 weeks to work on the project, and they put it off until Sunday night, then Sunday night seems like they have a lot of homework on Sunday night, which might not necessarily be the case. In talking with staff, and I appreciate this point, that we need to trust our teachers to understand the needs of their classes and to appropriately assign work outside of class, again, avoiding that label of homework and differentiating what is a project or a presentation or a paper, and it's not just under the single moniker of homework. I believe in work outside of class. I think at the high school it's necessary, and I think we have within our schedule underscored the importance of that, because twice a week we have an advisory period where we encourage students to do work outside of class, work with teachers, get extra help. So that is 2 hours a week that we're dedicating to work beyond what can be accomplished in the classroom. Another thing at the high school level is we're preparing students for life beyond Nantucket High School, whether that's a job, whether that's military service, whether that's college, but there are certain expectations and obligations that they need to meet. They need to be able to budget their time. They need to know what it is to meet a deadline. And so some of our work that we require outside of class has that intended purpose for our students as well. It's interesting, work outside of class, if you ask a student what their homework is, that could be a very diverse answer, because some of our teachers report if you tell students you have a test tomorrow and their mom or dad asks them at home, do you have any homework? They'll say no. Because they have a test tomorrow, yes, but studying for that test is not considered homework. And I talked about that at the admin meeting today, and I got the same look from the superintendent that seems odd, but some of our students process it that way. So there isn't a single easy answer at the high school. There's a great example of a young person that decided to take 5 advanced placement courses, not something we would recommend, and had a miserable year because 5 hours of homework was not unheard of. So I think we need to work well with our teachers, our students, and their families, making sure that there's a balance. And I think we try and do a nice job of that for the 8th to 9th grade transition, encouraging kids not to take a full course load of honors classes because you're coming into the high school, you're going to have co-curriculars and athletics, you might have a job. So it ends up being a balance for high school students about how much homework they have is often contingent upon the courses that they select.
Questions?
I'd be curious to know what the percentage is of completed, I don't expect you to know this, but completed homework. What is the average number of kids that come in with their homework finished and completed, A, on time, and B, whether it ever comes in? Just curious.
Yeah, and that was a discussion at today's faculty meeting, and some of our teachers reported on a given day in a certain level of course, there might be 60% that have done the homework. Then a different assignment outside of class, 20% will come in having done that. And again, I think it's that balance that sometimes, and certainly our student rep could, that students will rob Peter to pay Paul. I'm not going to do the social studies reading or the English reading tonight because I have the chemistry homework or the math problems that I'm going to focus on. And so, again, it comes back to that balancing act.
You know, I agree that I think that it has to be something coming home at some point. What I've seen sometimes is homework that has been given and then corrected, but then never gone back to go over. And I've questioned, I think, here before, in particular, say math. If you're going to give math homework and you've got students going home to work on computations that maybe the parents are not able to help them with, if there are answers that are incorrect, in my experience, I've sometimes felt like there was never any review of those answers. So I feel like if you're going to give homework, there has to be a solid purpose for that homework, that you have a plan to do. And I think, and also, again, personal experience, sometimes maybe in a science class or something, the students are sent home with very dry material, textbook, read a textbook, and you're sitting there for maybe an hour reading and looking, and maybe the kids sometimes get wise to say, well, I'm really just looking for the bolded words, and then I can answer them because they're in the questions. And it's just, I wonder, is that the best way to instruct our kids sometimes on those tough subjects? So I think, again, it's being that meaningful homework, but something that can keep kids engaged. And then the other thing which shocked me, and I learned this early on, is that parents do their kids' homework. Now, I don't mean they sit and take the books from them and they do it, but they sit with their kids and they work through it. And that has always surprised me. So I wonder if it's, and when I've asked why they do this, it's because, well, they've got sports, or they're traveling off island, or they can't possibly do all of this. There's too much.
Yep.
So I just want that out as a discussion that, there's parents out there doing the homework, God bless you, I guess, but that is that piece. And so are we giving too much?
Do you mind if I jump in here? I won't steal the thunder from the congressman from the middle school, which I think he will address your third question in his comments. But you raised an important point for me. The amount of time on homework is also varies among students. So a reading for me of 20 pages might take an hour, where another student could complete that same reading in 20 minutes or a half an hour. And some students, can zip through their math problems, and other students will labor on the same number of problems. So the amount of time also differs among the students. Your first question about going over the homework, I wouldn't disagree with you, and I think that harkens back to the superintendent's comments on purposeful homework. If it was important enough to give, I think it's important enough to review.
Right.
Yeah, and I just will weigh in a little bit. The amount, I don't ever think that reading is bad homework. Now, we can talk about the amount or the type, but I do hear from our college students, and not everybody goes to college, that the amount of reading, and we tell them, we try to prepare them for that, but the amount of reading that they have if there's any wall that they hit, that's usually it. It's staying up with that. And so I just would offer that. And dry material, you know, it's sort of the eye of the beholder. You know, I might feel that way about a certain science subject where Dr. Lepre would say, "You got to be kidding! That's the best stuff I've ever read." So you do have that as an issue, but they are going to face that in college. They're going to have to read that textbook that it is dry to get through it. The notorious subject in college is Western Civ. And the reading in a Western Civ or world history course is usually, or oftentimes, the one that buries kids. So it's just interesting, but I'm sure you'll have others follow up on.
And I just want to add a couple of comments. Reading, to me, is very important. And although college is many, many years ago, I do recall that, but I was an avid reader, so that didn't hurt me so much. I think it's teaching those courses that require a lot of reading is that when the kids are assigned a reading assignment, when they come back, if they're reviewed on it, because sometimes you have those kids that read, and they still don't get it, but if they have that conversation, it helps them look at reading a different way, helps them soak it in, you know, what's the word, interpret it,
Yeah.
and get something out of it. And it's the follow-up that we expect from teachers. And it may be happening with some, but I think there are certain expectations that we should have for all teachers, is that time spent in the classroom, meaningful, purposeful, you're working through the problems, you're assigning as homework, and then if they don't get it, it has to be reviewed again. I did something really stupid recently. I did my self-test of the SAT. Because I just wanted to see if it had changed much and what it's like. That's a lot of material, and it's time.
Yeah.
The key is that it's time. The math problems, believe it or not, I had no problem with. But getting it done in that amount of time was the trick. So you have to learn some strategies to deal with it. And I pride myself in trying to understand where my kids are coming from. When they're struggling with something, I kind of want to see why they're struggling. What's the struggle? Let's talk to them. I don't do their homework for them, but I do help them work through it. I mean, I think it's important. I'm tempted to come into class one day to see the new math because I do it the old school way. It works, you know. But how can you help your kid when you don't understand it? And sometimes you understand how they think. So as parents, I think we can help them kind of find a strategy to help them through it. I just wanted to add that. But I do have high expectations from the teachers in that you teach the material, you assign the homework, and not too much homework. I think 60 math problems are too much homework.
Correct.
Okay? I think 5 is not enough. There has to be a happy medium, and it has to kind of hit all the areas because those functions will kill you every time. And so I think that part's important. So that's my 2 cents.
Melissa?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thank you. Different teachers weight homework differently. Why is that? You know, why is there not a more uniform weight given to homework in an individual class?
I probably won't wade too deeply into policy because I think superintendent provided that.
Yeah.
Some teachers do whole points, total points. Some teachers have weighted categories on tests, quizzes, papers, projects, presentations, and we have never engaged the conversation of uniformity, and I'm not sure that I would be a fan
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
I like the teacher autonomy in deciding.
Yeah.
And again, those labels on what is homework, was the project homework or is it a project? And so I would be a little leery of getting into the percentage conversation.
Yeah, and I guess that, you know, on the flip side of that, it would be like, is the project being graded as homework or is it being graded? You know, because I have seen a project assigned as homework and it have an underwhelming impact on a grade, but is something that takes a significant amount of time to complete. And so it kind of goes back to the purpose of it. And when you have students who are trying to balance, and I think that students do a really good job of being aware of where different teachers weight things, and that has an impact on whether or not they're going to complete different assignments because so-and-so's homework is weighted less, even if it was something that they were more curious about. So I guess I don't really have a position either way. It's curious to me to see some teachers put so much emphasis on homework and others not, and does that have an unintended consequence of just, well, I don't have to do so-and-so's homework because this doesn't mean anything. And then I guess the other question is, how is homework or a teacher's dispensing of homework evaluated? Who's to say if it's meaningful or purposeful? How engaged do you get in the evaluation of what assignments are being, or do you know what I'm trying to say? How do we gauge that?
I think it's consumer feedback.
Yeah.
If a teacher is assigning an inordinate amount of homework or what seems to be busy work, that's likely to bubble up in conversation. And I would be hearing it from students or from colleagues whose students are going to express this concern, or guidance counselors. In terms of just an aggregate view of the school at whole, who's assigning what homework on a given night?
Yeah, no, that's too much. That I get that.
Unless it is a concern, I probably don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Does our student representative want to say anything, or
Go easy.
would you prefer to just?
Well, just from like my perspective of classes that I've taken, even in the past 2 years, a lot of teachers nowadays say that the homework is optional, that's not being graded, but it's on you whether or not you want to actually learn the material after class. And like I've had, for example, like math homework, and I do it, but yet it's the stuff that we learned in class, and then we have a test on it, and we're like, well, we didn't really get it in class, and then we didn't really get it at homework, and then he just goes over it, and we're like, okay. So a lot of times, teachers don't grade the homework, but they want you to do it. So then I think kids, a lot of times, are like, oh, well, I don't need to do that, because why would I do it if it's not being graded, if it doesn't count towards anything? And it's going to take my time away from whatever else I could be doing.
Except for those who get it, like you, that it's going to help you
Yeah.
on the exam,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Or at least that's how I interpreted what you said.
Yeah. And then also, what you were, Mr. Bucky, what you were saying, or Dr. Bucky, sorry, what you were saying about how some kids, I do agree with this, some kids put too much on their plate when they take, for example, like 5 APs, and if they are into extracurriculars and stuff like that, then they should be wise into taking their courses. And yet what I've noticed is that the school pushes kids a lot to take AP courses, even though you say, oh, but be smart about how many you choose, even though we have those assemblies that are like, you should really take some AP courses in your high school career because it'll look better on your college application and whatnot, even though if you're taking honors and APs, then you get a lot of homework.
We actually recommend that students don't take any more than 3 advanced placement courses.
Yeah.
And the impact on college admission is nebulous at best. They want to see, the feedback from college admissions offices is that they want to see that a student took the most rigorous, the most challenging load of courses that they could. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they overwhelmed themselves and took 6 APs or 5 APs. If they're planning to go into the humanities, they're probably going to want to see that they took AP US and AP Lang and AP Lit, but not necessarily stats and calc and environmental science and chem.
Yeah. What were you guys thinking?
I was just going to tag on to your point there. I think that's a really good one in that sometimes those complaints, consumer feedback on homework can be difficult to sort of sift through.
Sure.
Because I witness students having both the compulsion to want to drive themselves to take more and do more, and there's a fear of the ultimate judgment that's going to be handed down in your college acceptance versus, trying to create a well-balanced life. And then, how that plays into everything. So I've discovered that a guidance office really plays a really strong role
Yes.
in helping to mitigate that, and also to help communicate some of that, how to prioritize the work in the different classes, because it is a push-pull of pushing you to pushing one to be a little bit take on some extra risk and push themselves a little harder versus pushing yourself too hard.
It's not on my agenda, but I'm going to plug it anyway for that exact reason that you brought up advanced placement courses. We're going to do an advanced placement night on March 16th, where teachers teaching the courses are going to explain to families what can you expect from an AP chemistry course. What can you expect to better help students and families make those decisions, not to take 5, but what 3 are doable if you're committed to doing 3, and how much time can you expect beyond that class. So we're looking forward to hosting that for the first time this year in advanced placement night.
I almost feel like we shouldn't allow them to take 5.
Yeah.
I know it sounds harsh, but the reason is that's a lot of pressure to put on a young kid. And they need to be well balanced to go out into the real world, because 5 AP courses because you're stuck on the island, it's not the same as when you go off to college. It's just hard to believe that there's any expectation for you to have that much in 1 year,
Yeah, and
in
what-
one school year.
Yeah, and to your point, Zona, one of the most revelatory things for me was the college admissions officer that the guidance office hosted, and I can't remember his name or the college he came from, but he had this game, and just indulge me for a second, where you lined up with your various GPAs, and they talked through and sorted you into different criteria buckets, your location, what service you did, so on and so forth. And it ended up that who got accepted were the top 3 students who got accepted had lower GPAs than maybe even the 5th or 6th sort of ranked accepted students by the college. And so what that shed on to me was that there's this perception in students that they have to drive themselves for this exceptionally high GPA, yet given the criteria or the variety of criteria that you're evaluated on when you're going through the college process, that may not be the most important driver. So, taking 5 AP may not be the thing that edges you out. And that's where I said I think it goes back to the guidance office and really working with the students based on an awareness of what their goals are. But that was really good.
I think they almost need to go through some sort of weird, long drawn-out approval process before that happens, so that everybody, including the parent, is aware. Okay, so you're committing your child not to have a social life, not to play any sports. Let's just say worst case scenario, because they have 5 hours of homework to do every night if it takes them that long. But that's a lot. It's just a lot. I just don't think. I think we'd be remiss to continue to let that happen. To allow. I said not more than 3 sounds more than sufficient. If they want to do 4, there's a process. But 5, there's got to be a huge process to make that happen or not happen. I feel really, really strongly about that, knowing some of the background and some of the kids that I know. Yes, dear.
I just came up with 2 more comments. What I have a lot of my friends take multiple AP courses, and I always wonder, I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's the best idea, just because what I see is that an AP course is a college course. Even though it's the length of the year, it's still a lot more than what a usual class is at the high school. And when you think about it, a college schedule, you have that class maybe 1, 2, 3 days a week, rather than having it 4 days a week when you get homework every single night. So that's what I've noticed and taken from that. And personally, I've never taken an AP course in my high school career, I almost did this year and last year, but because I'm so invested in other extracurriculars, I was worried that I wasn't going to get into colleges that I wanted, and yet I have. So that's what also students need to realize, that if you take CP and honors classes and you do just as well as you would, or you'd get a C in an AP course, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get into a college that has a rigorous academic, like, curriculum or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that's what kids also need to understand, that they need to push themselves, but not as far as you may think that they need to, because if you're invested in other things, then that's also going to push you farther in the acceptance process.
Well said.
I have always been impressed that the words I hate to hear, even as a student, was somebody getting up and saying, is this going to be on the final exam? I think I like to see kids studying hard. I think homework plays a vital part. I think that when we had our students here, they were donating the money to the school. I asked them, how are you doing? Because I think if you get through the first semester, then you pretty much figured it out. But I think it's an enormous culture shock, even going to a small college, because we have a lot of great students, but they're going to a place with a whole lot of great students.
Exactly.
And I think that they have to be prepared to work. And I think, for example, the volume of reading can be intimidating, but you have to learn to budget your time. You have to learn that you have to do it. I'm a startlingly good example of my first semester in college was a disaster. Got a nice letter from the dean, but I straightened it out. But you have to learn how to study, and I think that it's an opportunity, particularly, we're talking about the high school now, and we're talking about the later grades in the high school. I mean, to get acclimated to doing the work. And I think it's important that they do it. I think if we get down to the other grades where probably 50 math problems are given out, I have my doubts about that. But I think getting used to a large volume of reading is very important for our students.
I also, to your point though, Tim, is the differentiation in the work by class and even by student. And I have seen teachers who make, even if there's not a child who has necessarily an IEP, but make accommodations for students, not to, I don't want to say coddle them, but being able to deliver the work to meet their needs. And that is really important communication. And I think, John, when you said customer feedback, it is really important responsibility of parents to be involved with the teachers and say, so-and-so is struggling in this way, or this assignment seems a little something, and engage in a conversation with the teachers to understand why they're doing the work and how they differentiate that work in some of their other classes.
I think John prefaced his comments here to say that they have the advantage of different levels. Mm-hmm. And when you go to the middle school and the elementary school, that makes homework discussion a lot harder, quite frankly, because you have such a range of abilities in a classroom. Not that you don't have a range in some, but it's not the same range that
they're
they're
a little
facing.
bit better divided
Right.
here as opposed to being in the same classroom there.
So that, that is a huge challenge to, I would say, particularly a middle school teacher. Because in the elementary, you have, in most cases, one teacher, so they know what you're getting for homework in social studies, science, math, and English language arts. So the coordination piece in the middle school is a greater challenge and the range of abilities. So I don't know if you...
Can I just another comment, and it, not really necessarily pertaining to the homework, but I think it would be interesting to see, maybe from the nurse's office and from guidance, the number of students that spend time out of school. My daughter's a senior. This is the second time I've had a student who's a senior. I cannot believe how many kids are stressed, getting physically sick, feeling like they're overwhelmed, and I worry that we're doing this to our kids and teaching them that's the way that they need to go out in the world to be successful. I think we can teach them, and I think the guidance office does a great job helping students with their stress level and their scheduling. But I still worry, and I think, and maybe apropos for the state now, that we're put in a lot of pressure, I think, to offer AP classes. I think that schools are graded on how many AP classes that they provide, and then how many students sign up. And when you've got that coming down, I think it's just natural that stress is going to be put onto kids to say, I've got to do this. I've heard from students, I've heard from parents that kids are, talking among themselves. Are you taking an AP? Well, if you're taking, I should take one. I mean, good for you for making that decision that you made other choices because you did what was best for you. But I can guarantee that we've got kids in classes that are overwhelmed, and it isn't necessarily because it's what they wanted to learn, it's because they felt they had to. And that's our responsibility.
And you wouldn't see it reflected in their grades. You may not see it reflected in poor performance.
Because they've got time out of school, or they make themselves physically sick. So I don't know. I would hate to see our seniors go through this last really important year stressed to the gills. I don't think that's a good thing that we're teaching our young adults to go through life.
On the other hand, if you go to college, how often do people take that into account, or they just provide the work and you do the work? I mean, I think that we have to expect, I think the expectation is you're going to go in and do the work, and however you do it. I don't know. I think it's a tricky issue. I think kids are stressed, but I think that stress can be beneficial. It can also be destructive.
To a certain extent.
Yeah.
To a certain
I
extent.
think this is a classic conversation that happens, and it shows you where people can be on the issue of homework, and that it isn't a simple thing. I think the other word that John used that strikes me, and I'm hearing it in some of your conversations, is balance. You know, it's really about
But it's teaching them
maintaining
balance.
the right balance, but understand sometimes it's not the school pushing the APs.
Yeah,
It can be parent or child
Oh, no,
know.
driven just as easily,
Yeah.
so.
I think we know that, but I
Right.
think it's kind of up to us who see it in some shape or form, I would imagine. If you got a kid in your class, you have to notice something. I can't imagine that they're that great at hiding it. And I think it's our job to address it. We're talking about the issue, we're addressing the issue here, but what can we do to help the concern? What can we do to make these students and our parents feel comfortable to come and talk to us about it so we can walk them through what the stress is and how we can alleviate it to a certain extent? I think we're responsible.
And I think John's idea that they're introducing this year of having parents come in
I think that's
and
great.
talk about it, I think that's a great answer to your question. It might not be the
I think
only
it's a great
answer,
start. I think
but
we're
it's,
gonna need some one-on-ones too,
right.
because not everybody's gonna feel comfortable in that meeting.
Right.
Well, I think AP courses have become sort of like an amulet, and that it has become a measure perhaps of what kids want to do. But I don't think, as you've said, it isn't something magical, and kids have to understand the amount of work that goes into it.
Yeah, and it just, to me, it goes back to, and I don't know if necessarily the guidance department is what I lean towards most heavily, but guidance from teachers and staff who care, and the guidance counselors,
And parents.
you know, working to support the whole student and engage with that student to talk with them about this process and what the goals are. Because I think you're right, Sarah, you have students who are incredibly misinformed about what they need to have to get into a school. I hear often, I'll never get into college. It's like, no, I promise you there's a college that will,
Yeah.
I promise you there's a college that will accept you.
There are thousands.
But, you know, but there's a drive, and so, you know, maybe the guidance team itself is not what I specifically mean, but a culture of guidance around walking students through accomplishing their goals. Because I think you're right too, Tim, that, you know, to reach certain goals, we do have to learn how to drive towards them and accept when we don't sometimes. So it's complicated.
That's the balance.
Yeah,
Is when you don't make it,
yeah,
how to handle that.
yeah.
To realize it's not the end of the world.
Right.
Just choose a different path.
Right.
Take a different course. Figure it out.
Sounds so good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds easy.
Yeah.
I think a good idea for the AP night would be to take some kids from the AP courses right now and have them talk at it, or like the AP students now go talk to other classes. Like for example, the AP Chem class, some students go talk to like the CP and honors Chem classes and tell them for real what the class actually is, rather than a teacher or a parent talking about it if they've had a kid before do it. Or an honest review.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
My colleagues, never going to live this.
John wanted to go first. I just want to say. and-
So excited to go first. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to have this discussion. I think it's an important discussion. It's an enjoyable discussion, and there's a whole range of perspectives. And I think you're going to hear that I'm on leaning towards an end of the spectrum as opposed to being more centrist. So a few things to clarify. First, this is something that we talk about at CPS a lot. It's a myth that we don't give homework at the middle school. However, it's very possible that that the fourth and fifth grade, our teachers are giving more homework overall than we are at the middle school, and our philosophical beliefs are why that's happening. I do want to say that there's probably one area at the middle school where we probably need to do a better job, and that is assigning more reading. So we've talked a little bit tonight about reading, and we'll be talking with our teachers about productive ways to assign reading. Having students self-select books to be reading independently, not just the one book that they're reading for their English class, but being really thoughtful about what that homework entails. Because there's a great book. I've brought some resources. I was going to do some quotes, but I'm going to try to be speedier than I was originally going to be, because I didn't anticipate John being so long, because normally he's very quick timing us. But there's a book called Read Aside by Kelly Gallagher, and how schools are killing reading and what you can do about it. And I do fear that there's a lot of busy work that's assigned along with reading, and therefore kids start to hate reading. And so while I want to start leaning in the direction of assigning more reading to do, I don't want to then tie it with a bunch of busy work. And that gets to the really kind of core issue that Mike led with, that it's really overall less about the argument of no homework or lots of homework, and it's much more about making sure that we're thoughtful and giving quality homework. Now, philosophically, I personally would be in favor of, on most nights, only assigning the kind of reading that I'm talking about, and not really assigning other kinds of homework. That's me personally. Teachers have some latitude at CPS to be able to assign, hopefully, quality homework as they wish. But here's some of the reasons for my philosophy and our philosophy as a school leaning towards less homework than piling on. So one that I think is really important is an equity issue, and you'll hear me talk about equity a couple of times in my comments tonight. It is simply not a reality for some of our students, given their home situation, to be able to complete homework assignments. It's just not a reality. When they go home, some of our students there's a few different scenarios. One could be a home situation where they have to care for younger siblings within the home, or have a whole bunch of familial responsibilities within the home, or the home has multiple families in it and there just simply isn't a space or anybody that can support them to be able to complete that work. That's not true of all of our students. Some of our students have plenty of space, plenty of support, but as soon as that bell rings at 2:20, they've got piano, followed by soccer, followed by hip-hop dance, followed by theater. Oh yeah, they have to eat dinner, and so by the time they even sit down to homework, it's pretty late at night. And so there's a whole range of reasons why homework is not going to get done on a regular basis. And one of you asked about homework completion rate. I think Pauline asked about homework completion rate. And I don't have that data, but anecdotally, teachers certainly reported in my first couple of years when there was more homework assigned, that there was a very low completion rate overall for homework. The other reason that I would lean towards not assigning homework, in particular math is the example that I'm going to use, but is it sets up this dynamic at home for a war. A nightly battle where the child sits down to do that newfangled math homework that the parents don't understand, and so they say, "Mom, I've got these problems to do," and Mom says, "Oh, I know how to do that. You do it this way." And the child says, "No, Mom, that's not how we're supposed to do it. We have to do it this way." And Mom says, "No, that," and it's this back and forth, and the slamming of doors, and it's
I give up support.
It sets up this clash. When we want families to be the most supportive place for a child, it ends up being this battle and this war that we're causing. I would much rather see that battle take place in the classroom, because the student's not going to be as aggressive to the teacher. The teacher's going to know the math and be able to coach them through how to struggle through those problems. So you've heard in the past a lot of teachers talk about flipped classrooms and things like that, where the work that's done is done in class, where the teacher can serve more as coach and facilitator of that work. Let me move forward with some other examples of math. If we send home 25 problems of math, and so in class the teacher teaches a concept. Let's, for example purposes, say the teacher teaches about dividing fractions. I gave this example in our leadership meeting earlier today. So the teacher teaches how to divide fractions. Now, we all know, we just took the SATs like Zona did, and we all know that to divide fractions you have to multiply by the reciprocal, and we could do that. But this child didn't quite grasp it in the class, and now has to go home and do 25 problems of dividing fractions. And they do it wrong 25 times. They've just practiced and formed a bad habit of performing the math incorrectly that now has to be unlearned and then retaught and corrected over time, setting that child back. It's just giving homework for the sake of giving homework is not helping our students. The opposite is true too. Let's say that you teach the concept of dividing fractions, multiplying by the reciprocal. Kid gets it. Kid totally gets it, and still has to do those 25 problems, or worse. The example given earlier, 60 problems. Why are we giving 60 problems to a kid that already gets it with a concept? Why not with the kids that get it? If we're going to give an assignment, give them something that stretches them to do more, or give them far fewer problems because they can clearly demonstrate that they've mastered the subject matter with far fewer problems than just 25. I'm really not in favor of setting a time amount, and this was touched upon and when about an hour ago when John was stealing my thunder. So the time factor is significant. So Zona, who's still taking her SATs, and so she's up on the math, is going to be given some assignment, whether it's reading or math. It's going to take Zona like 15, 20, 30 minutes to complete that assignment. I'm not nearly as smart as Zona, nor have I recently taken the SATs, and so that same assignment is not going to take me 15, 20, 30 minutes. It's going to take me an hour and a half, 2 hours. And there's a whole range in our classrooms of kids that if you say, oh, you've only got 15 minutes of homework tonight, we're causing that stress that Pauline talked about on some kids that can't possibly complete that assignment in those 15 minutes. one of the arguments that we hear sometimes when we hear about how there's the potential that the fifth grade is giving more homework than we are, and then there's this lull in homework over the course of the 3 years, and then they go to high school, and then there's a lot of homework. Are you really preparing kids for high school? And we believe that if we are committed to instilling in kids the critical thinking skills that they need, the foundational skills that they need, the reading skills, which is why I do want to increase the amount of reading that we're giving, they're going to be far better prepared for high school than just if we arbitrarily start giving a whole bunch of hours of homework. Again, the inequity piece at home, if a student goes home to a very supportive house, there's no guarantee of who's doing that homework. So I think this issue was addressed earlier as well. Some kids have a ton of support and scaffolding from a parent, from an older sibling, maybe relied on a peer. So to then take that homework completion as being, oh, this kid is doing all their work. We don't really know for sure who's completed that homework, so I'd be concerned about that. There is, I brought some resources. I'll just mention what I brought, but without going into the quotes. First of all, ASCD is a publication, puts out a lot of publications. Just in January of 2017, their education update, Does Homework Help is the name of their article. So it's an article that comes out, I don't know, monthly, weekly, in all of the journals that we collectively read. Jo Bowler is a professor at Stanford. She runs an open source course that any of you could enroll in. She's written this book called Mathematical Mindsets. She's adamantly opposed to assigning math homework, and she's right now probably the leading mathematician in the country. Rick Wormley, I brought two of his books because he's my favorite. He's my educational crush. He's just a rock star. He's awesome. Fair isn't always equal. Differentiation. He talks a lot about, again, quality of homework, and two resources that also talk about quality of homework over quantity, homework done right, rethinking homework. Kathy Vatterott calls herself the homework lady. There's a ton of great resources out there. As Mike said, I'm sure someone else could come up here and give you the same stack of, or a different stack of books, same quantity of resources on the opposite end of the spectrum. But these are people that I, for one, really respect, that are pretty widely respected throughout the country, and side with the studies that show that there's no correlation, particularly at the younger grades, no correlation, not some, no correlation between homework and student achievement at the lower grade levels. As grade levels go up, there's a little bit increasingly more correlation between homework completion and student achievement, but at the lower grades there is no correlation. So really we have to ask them, why are we assigning the homework? Now, could homework teach the skills like accountability and responsibility? Possibly. I think at the middle school level there are other ways to be able to teach those issues. And one of the things that we talk about a lot at CPS is grading. And I don't want to go into grading tonight because it's a whole nother forum, but whether or not to grade homework is an issue. So a few years ago I applauded the school committee adjusting the policy that Mike shared with you to make that 10% rule and not count it any more than 10%. I would love to see it go down to 0%. I would love to see homework not count, not assigned, but not count towards your grade, because I think that our students are playing the game of school. They only do the homework when they're told it's going to count. It's kind of your question of, is this going to be on the test? And I want to instill in students a love of learning, that they learn to complete the work, not to get the points, but to learn. And if we have quality homework, purposeful homework, that's key. In college, you learn very quickly. I had a very similar first semester, it sounds like, to Dr. Lepre. I got crushed my first semester, so I learned after that first semester, if you don't do the reading, you don't pass the assessment. Now, the difference is, if you had a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, or Tuesday, Thursday class, there's a ton of time to do the reading. You just have to not be a clown and be doing things that you're not supposed to be doing. You have to sit down and manage your time. So the skills that we should be teaching kids are about managing time. And if we assign more reading starting at an earlier level, at our level, I think that's going to set kids up for success much more than giving a ton of homework. So that's
I
my
agree half with you, Peter.
presentation. We never agree 100%. We've been on the jury together. We're never gonna agree
Say
100%.
black, I say white. I think homework teaches independent learning and thinking, and I think it should count. In some short form or fashion, it should count some points. And I think no homework is just not a good idea. They're never going to learn to work or be responsible for working on their own. Whether we know if they did it or not, to me, is by how they perform on the exams. But absolutely no homework, I think, is just a recipe for disaster. That's my opinion.
I don't disagree with you. The question would be, though, when you're going home and you're reading your independent reading, what's the follow-up
Yes.
from that?
Good question.
Because
Good question.
I can easily tell you I've read a book.
Yeah. So some of our teachers do this now. They're reading a book together in class, and it's also a second independent reading. And the accountability is to be able to so it's like a mini, just a portion of the class. There's accountability actually doing it, having them write down all the new vocabulary, write down all of the summaries, pages and pages of summaries. Because we're reading struggle to write. Whereas if we just said to them, you get to just talk about the great characters that you're learning about, those are the kinds of reading experiences that we all have now, like when we go to the beach, or on our Kindles, wherever we go. Like we're reading on the boat because we dive into these characters and drown out everything else. Like we need to inspire kids to have that same passion and love of reading, and I think they do that when you hold them accountable just by having them talk about it, not have to just do busy work in response to it.
No, I love it anytime our kids get to verbalize and sort of present. The only other thing that I do think has been valuable, and this was more in high school when my son was in a math class in high school, actually Mr. Saradelis' class, where he, it's like for you, Mr. Saradelis, he would bring home videos and he would watch a video that Mr. Saradelis had put together. Then they would have the instruction in the class, and to me that made so much sense because learning new concepts, yes, you could sit and listen and then they would go over it in class and they would actually do the work in the class, as opposed to doing, having the presentation in class and then sending them home with 10 problems, and what if they didn't get it?
Right.
And that's the clashing, and I agree, the stress that is put on families to get homework completed, for some families can be very strong. So I like the reading. I also would be fine with something if it was something the kids could just watch and then know that that was going to be related in the next follow-up day.
Yeah, that's that flipped classroom model.
I was going to actually mention that too because I had experience with Alice Crowley doing that in her math class, and that seemed like a really wonderful way for math that kids can watch and learn and observe a process and then talk about it and bring their questions to class. I guess I'm gonna be a little flip and challenge just a little bit to say I would love my kids to love a clean bathroom, but I have to teach them how to clean the bathroom, and I have to set an expectation that it's their responsibility to clean the bathroom. It is not fun work. It's not one that my kids appreciate, but as they get older and they live on their own and they're like, oh my God, this bathroom is disgusting, I know how to clean it. Years later, I see the result. I get the benefit that my kids like a clean bathroom. And I am being flip in that process, but...
How's your son's dorm room?
Spotless. Spotless. And that's...
So the lesson sunk in.
It has sunk in. So, but my point, I guess, is that, and I guess my sort of greater concern would be, particularly in middle school, and I think more for 8th to 9th grade transition, because I feel like I'm with you for 6th and 7th grade. For 8th grade, I wonder how we measure the success of that philosophy against the success of students in 9th grade. And how do we tell if that's worked? And are the students in 9th grade struggling in some capacity because the expectation is different, and perhaps they haven't embraced the love of learning and critical thinking skills, and are struggling with how to balance the rigor and demands of a high school level class. So I think for me, that's where it sits a little bit more challenged.
Sure. I think that what I didn't say was that not only do we not give homework, there is homework. It is progressively more as you move through the grades, although 6 and 7 are pretty similarly light, and then the increase is in 8th. Our 8th grade students receive more homework than anybody else, arguably most of that coming from English language arts, which again I think is appropriate. So I mean, you can ask students about what they've experienced if they're experiencing kind of that cliff feeling of all of a sudden, hitting the wall when they go from 8th to 9th. But I think that there's quite a bit of homework to do, mostly in the humanities, social studies, and language arts.
And I guess and I'm glad to hear that, because I guess the progression then is less about, it's about critical thinking and learning, but it's creating that habit of studying, and also a process of how to learn. You might hear a lecture or work on problems in class, but I need to go home and think about it a little bit, which is what we're saying to students when we talk about homework, is we don't want your academic learning to stop at 2:20 when the bell rings, and you have some responsibility in that learning. If you are challenged on an assignment and you got questions wrong, it's your responsibility to talk to your teacher maybe and go in and find out why you got them wrong and work with them on it. But I just want to be careful with something I heard you say, which is ask students. I think in some ways, if your homework policy is going to vary slightly, or how you I don't want to say your policy is different, because the policy is the policy, but how you administer homework in your school is slightly different. I do think we have a vertical alignment responsibility to check in and make sure that our 9th and 10th graders are being successful, and if they are being challenged in a way, it's not as a result of of a poor study habit not being addressed early on.
I would respond by saying a couple of things. One, I would want us to be very cautious of going in what I would consider to be the wrong direction, of all of a sudden increasing the amount of homework simply to justify the amount of homework that's being given at the high school. I would want to be very careful about that.
And that's not what I'm suggesting.
I think that
I'm suggesting that we need to prepare them for it.
If anything, I would want the 9th grade to not be as big a leap by them speaking with our 8th grade teachers and making a logical transition. And I think that we already spend that time kind of having those conversations. I don't think there's a cliff, but maybe there is a little bit of a cliff jump that's going on. But I would be very cautious to have it trickle down in the wrong way, because what ends up happening is that keeps going down, and you end up with 2nd graders coming home with a lot of homework that is again, really not a good idea.
And I don't know if there is or there isn't. I'm just suggesting that it's administrators' responsibility to check on that in those vertical conversations to make sure that, the progression is natural and working for the students'
The other thing that I want to say is that we're working on making some adjustments to our schedule for next year. And I've got 6 different drafts going right now, but all of them are going to include our take on what happens at the end of the day on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the high school. We're calling it win-win time. What I need, who I need. So from a student's perspective, it's what I need. From a teacher's perspective, it's who I need. And so every student, each time that this falls in the schedule, will be spending time with a teacher to either extend their learning or get them caught up or reteaching. It's not going to be a huge chunk of time, but a couple times a week, this win-win, what I need, who I need time is going to be built in to be able to, again, alleviate some of those struggles that would otherwise take place at home. So
I think that's awesome.
Clever title.
I like that.
It's like that, teachers are coming up with that.
Pretty
yeah.
fantastic.
Dee Dee Avery came up with that.
Oh, that's a DBA, that's a DBA ring.
Yeah.
You should do a poem on it.
Do you remember anything from middle school?
It is so different nowadays from when I was even though I'm so old, but I just remember my 8th grade, I had Mr. Davis and Miss Crowley, and they were probably some of the best teachers I've ever had, like, in teaching in general, and I think
Can you just speak into the microphone real clearly when you say that?
and I know Mr. Davis won't believe me when I say that, but the reading that we did in 8th grade really, I feel like, impacted me in the way that it prepared me for 9th grade, because I remember we were reading some pretty heavy stuff, like The Book Thief, a lot of stuff about the Holocaust. We read So Far from Baby Grove, To Kill a Mockingbird. Like, that was some pretty heavy stuff for like 13, 14-year-olds, but I really think that it prepared us for that. And Miss Crowley, I still tell her to this day, she was probably one of the best math teachers I've ever had. And I don't know what her different teaching style is, but she really just gets to the kids, and I think the whole thing that she started this year with Miss Lombardi is just an incredible idea, and I think it's really going to hit kids in a really awesome way.
I love it. If you could drop the mic at that point. Yes, yeah.
Drop the mic.
Anything else?
Brady dropped the mic.
I don't want to talk about it.
Well, since I went to middle school in the 50s, I'll just say it was a little different, a little more stressful.
Was it even middle school or was it junior high?
No, it was
Junior high.
it was 3 years of Latin, a couple of years of French, algebra, so that I didn't have to do anything until I was a junior in high school. And by then they were convinced I was smart, but I just had it before. No, but I think to me, the key thing is the love of reading, and I think that's what we have to encourage. I mean, when I see kids in my office, of course, have concussions, but I say, "What's your favorite subject?" You know, and some say recess, and some say lunch, but it's always interesting. I say, "Well, do you play video games?" "Oh yeah, I play video games." "Well, how long do you spend playing video games?" "Oh, an hour or two a day." I mean, they should be reading, you know, and I think, to me, the most important thing is to get kids reading.
So, 2 comments on that, and then we can hopefully transition to my colleague.
Maybe one.
In 6th grade next year, we're going to have all kids take a reading class, and that's going to be one of the kind of goals, primary goals of that is that kind of inspiring the love of reading, and we think it's going to pay big dividends, not just in language arts, but in math too, if we can increase the reading levels of our students. So that's one thing. I'm losing my train of thoughts. That might be the only comment I make.
Well, you've equaled John Bucky, so I think you're in good shape. He'll let you know that, right?
Yeah.
Senator from the elementary, 2 minutes.
I'd love to go on record saying I would like to be last every single time the 3 of us.
Thanks, Pete.
Okay.
There is some perspective in sitting there hearing both of my colleagues and your comments, and so I think that I might be brief. So I live somewhere in between. I think homework is important. I believe that it's about quality of homework, which has been said. I would differ with Peter in the correlation of homework and student achievement because he neglected to say reading. Reading work outside of the classroom does correlate with improved student achievement. And that's more of building that foundation. And that's what we do at the elementary school is we're building a foundation. As an administrator in this district, as a teacher and an administrator in another district, as a girl who babysat for children, I had deadlines. I had responsibilities. I needed to account for time. I think homework is really important to help kids build that foundation. We have, in the elementary school, we have the handbook, and it talks about our policies and practices, and there's certainly 10 minutes in kindergarten and first grade, and 10 minutes per grade level, so 20 at second, 30 at third, and so on. I reached out to our team leaders and asked them to ask every single teacher on their team what they were doing for homework. And so they provided the feedback to me that I will share with you. There are some things that I don't know, to your point, Melissa, exactly about what they're doing. I was pleased to see that they are more alike across the grade level than they are different. Math is an area that our district struggles with. Math is happening at every single grade level for homework. It is. The homework, for my belief, and I think in most cases, the practice at the elementary school, homework's purpose is about practicing what we were taught, previewing, which has to do with the flipped classroom, and could in fact be do that reading tonight so that we can engage in a purposeful conversation about it tomorrow. But you can build that background knowledge by reading it tonight to be ready to talk about it the next day. But then also for some children, that's an opportunity to enrich and expand on what you do know, where that's that child that they don't need 60 math questions. They knew how to do this. Math, what were you saying, dividing fractions. So I think that philosophically, that's where I live, that I think everybody should have a responsibility. I have those responsibilities myself, and I have to budget my time. So do my daughters, so do 5-year-olds. We need to know what we need to do. Every single grade level in the elementary school has reading assigned as part of daily homework. This struggle is exactly what that read aside book says, that sometimes we take the fun out of that reading. And we ask them to do summaries or reports. However, we also engage in conversations with kids about that work. The push that I went to my team leaders with was, is homework the same for every kid in the grade level? And I was pleased to find out it's not. It is differentiated for the students. Now, is it differentiated as much as I would love it to be? Nope. But it's differentiated, meaning in kindergarten, in first grade, in second grade, in third, fourth. Fourth and fifth do a lot of literature circles, so they're reading books on their level and they're having conversations about them the next day. But they're typically at their instructional level or independent level so that they can do that reading. But that's about practice, and you need that in the elementary school. And for our little ones, they're getting the level they're on, and they take it home, and they have to read it to their teddy bear, and they have to read it to their mom or dad, and then they build their fluency and get stronger and better at reading, and take that back for the next day. The math is often similar. It does get differentiated for students with IEPs, where we make those accommodations and we alter the work. Spelling sometimes is done that way as well. And some accommodations are made for ELL students, where we have a Spanish math expressions homework book. So it's written in Spanish, so that the math is not the problem, nor is the reading at that time and place for some kids if Spanish is their primary language that they can read. We have set up in the elementary school 3 days a week homework club, and for those kids where that equity problem exists, we solicit them to be a part of it. And so those are the kids that stay Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And because the homework is not meant to take longer than 50 minutes, and that's for our oldest kids, that can get accomplished in our homework club. And that is, students from the high school are in there, and our TAs run that. So they have adults, they have samples of manuals and workbooks, and they have things to support the students if they're struggling or have a question. I don't think homework is something that should go home and become a battle with the parents. It's instead, you got to know your multiplication facts, and you got to know them, or you're not going to be able to do division very well. And you need to know addition. And so that's the foundation at the elementary school. That's where we are.
I would say one question that hasn't really been addressed is, School vacations, what do they go home with?
Don't typically.
We don't give homework over vacations.
Okay.
We do homework Monday through Thursday. Typically don't do it on the weekend. The vacations are not typically assigned. I will tell you that I meet with every family who is taking their child out for more than 5 days, and we do give some work for those students. Some of that work that we ask them to do, though, is you're going to a different place, do a travel journal. But also, when I talk with those parents, I say it's important for kids to have that structure and routine every day. So build in some time to read and to write and to practice your math facts. But we don't give it vacations or weekends.
Question?
No? Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Lola?
See why it's great to go last.
No, but I'd ask another question.
Sure.
I'm going to ask another question because I see these kids and I say, how much do you play video games? If you're spending an hour or two a day playing video games, you should be spending an hour or two reading. I mean, I tell the kids, because I'm horrible, a monster when I start grilling them, you know, that reading is the most important thing. They learn a love of reading because everything else comes from that.
You're gonna have to send a letter home to the parents on that.
And that's
I know, but
sometimes that's.
Where I'm concerned with the video games is not that it's necessarily replacing reading, although I definitely support reading. It's replacing playing.
No more
And conversation.
Going home,
Conversation.
outside, and being able to play and learn through play, and yes, conversations with children when you're playing, that concerns me in particular.
And social
You're gonna have to have a
isolation.
life class in every school, one in the middle school, two in high school.
The other thought that I forgot, things you're saying, yeah, with the video game thing, schools have been slow to tap into what's so exciting
Gaming,
about video
gaming.
games with kids. And
Yeah.
so, with a video game, there's these levels, and they play this video game and they play level 1, and they get stuck and they can't get past it. They don't quit. They go back and they play level 1 because they know there's more levels and there's more prizes. And so they keep trying and they keep trying, and then they get to level 2 and they get stuck. They keep trying, they get to level 3. We haven't tapped into that same thing. Instead, we say, you actually haven't started at 0. You started at 100, but oh, you missed that assignment. Ding, you can't get 100 anymore. Like, you can't get the high score in school. And so, again, it goes back to the grading and incentivizing. We can make reading incentivized by like earning badges and stickers and all these things that they earn in video games. I think we're starting to tap into that same kind of addiction that they have to the video, and they can have that for reading. And our voracious readers, that's what's hooking them. J.K. Rowling and what was the vampire thing that came out here? Twilight. Those things tapped into this idea of like, there's more in the series. I've got to read the first one to know I know what's going on in the second one. Like, brilliant. Kids were reading without even realizing, oh yeah, I'm not going to read.
But then movies come out and then you just don't.
Right, takes it away.
I just wanted to comment, I was going to make you sit back down too.
Oh, great.
That I
Still less than that.
I love the homework club, and I really applaud that effort, and I love advisory, and I love the time. And I particularly, I'm very intrigued about the way to build that time as an add-on to the day, because again, I don't think it's necessarily about completing the work, but being able to have that guided support around wherever you may need that. If it's understanding a complex math question, or just having somebody, I don't know, sit and review your schedule with you and help you figure out which problems to solve first, or a strategy around learning. So I don't know, having TAs and high school students help in the elementary school is probably not the right formula, or same formula in the high school, in middle school. But I that 50 minutes a day of added guided support, I'm not sure how we get there. And then I think we talk about homework policy periodically, and just as a suggestion, I think it would be interesting next time to not just hear, or maybe mix it up and hear some teachers' perspectives on homework and what they do, because Yeah, because well, I see you in the audience.
No.
Thank you for being here. But I don't want to take any more time on it tonight. I think that, getting some, to help us relate a little bit more to some of the benefits teachers see with that is great too. So.
Stamina
Thank you
is
all.
another thing that I neglected to mention. When I think about writing instruction at the elementary school, we teach mini lessons, we teach genres, we focus on craft moves, and then students get some time in class to do that writing work, and then the teacher is walking around having individual conferences with students to talk about their writing. But at times, that's a great thing to send home. Because it's about their thoughts and what they're trying to convey, but using those moves that they've been taught. And you need to build that stamina.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Okay, moving on. Comments from the public? Seeing none. Committee discussion and votes to be taken. I'd like to entertain a vote to approve the NHS field trip, Diversity Club to Berkeley Performance Center and Museum of Fine Arts on March 9th and 10th.
Nice. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. A vote to approve the gift donation from the Community Foundation of Nantucket to Nantucket Community School for Wee Whalers in early childhood programming in the amount of $10,000.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. That's generous.
Very.
Wonderful.
A vote to approve the gift donation from the Community Foundation of Nantucket Gutsy Gals from...
Remain is the next one. Remain. See, the first one was Community Foundation.
Okay. Gift donation from Remain Nantucket to Nantucket Community School for Wee Whalers and early childhood programming in the amount of $10,000.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now, a vote to approve a gift donation from the Community Foundation for Nantucket Gutsy Gals Fund to Nantucket Community School for Wee Whalers in early childhood programming in the amount of $1,500.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to approve a gift donation from Josh and Bernadette Brown, the Will Brown Donor Advised Fund to Nantucket Community School for the Learn to Swim program in the amount of $1,000.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to approve the gift donation from the Community Foundation for Nantucket to Nantucket Community School of $3,000. What is the ESOL?
ESL, ELL, English language learners, English speakers of other languages
Okay,
is.
it's a very good acronym.
Yeah, you can,
For the ESOL Community Symposium and $5,000 for ESOL teacher training program through the Adult Education and Enrichment Department. Go ahead,
So
motion.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to approve a gift donation from the Nantucket Land Council to CPS gift account for equipment for the fresh and marine water quality testing kits in the amount of $196.39. Can I have a
So
motion?
moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to approve the agreement between Nantucket Community School and Administrative Software Applications, Inc.
So moved. What are you going to do?
I guess,
for 25,000, yeah.
February 1st.
February 1st through June 30th for $25,000.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approve the minutes of the January 17th, 2017 public hearing meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A motion to approve the January 17th, 2017 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A motion to approve transfers and invoices.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Superintendents report.
Can I just, before you jump there, what a list. I
Yeah.
don't know how many school districts get to go through
No, it's
so
amazing.
many gifts. And I always think of Robin, because Robin was always very good at this time to always give a thanks, but it's remarkable. And the majority of it going to the community school this time. So congratulations, Caitlin, for all of the work. But we're so lucky and so fortunate. Sorry, Mike.
No, absolutely, thank you. Just quickly, the school committee self-evaluation, it's time for that. You'll find a copy in your packets, and I would ask that you complete that and submit it to Logan, and then she will collate it and present it at the next meeting. It is a self-evaluation that covers areas of governance, operations, member relations, committee and superintendent relations, strategic planning, community relations, fiscal management, and the conduct of school committee meetings. So if you would, at your leisure, submit that to Logan.
When would you want that, Mike?
I think before the next, maybe sometime next week would be great, because then we could present it to you for the second February meeting or the first March meeting, whatever you prefer.
Okay.
The enrollment update, I think it's interesting to see the increase in since January. I think when we gave you the January report, we shared at that time that there were already new kids coming in. I really like, again, showing what Zona requested, the number of withdrawals versus the number of new entries. I think that gives you a good idea of, where it's happening, where those numbers are happening. Job security is still at hand. 1588, we're approaching that magic 1,600 number. We'll see when we reach it. And then finally, on the horizon, I think it may not be necessary for the school committee to have a second meeting in February. You can if you'd like, but we can easily put the self-evaluation into March, and I haven't heard anything on Sparks and Bartlett Road, so it's the pleasure of the school committee.
I'd like to poll the committee. How many masochists are there here?
I'd like to do another discussion on homework on that, actually.
And dress code.
And dress code.
Dress code.
I don't have a problem with missing a meeting.
The 21st, we wouldn't have one.
Good.
I'm good for that.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
okay. You all done, Mike?
I am.
Subcommittee, work group, liaison reports. Student.
The student council is selling candygrams in the high school, and I think it's going really well. Miss Yolakini bought some for his good friends in the high school, and Mr. Bucky, I don't know if you have yet. I wasn't here today. Maybe you.
An update on how many we received.
Oh, yes, I forgot it. So those are on sale, so definitely. Middle school, high school, you can buy some too.
We've got our own candy drive going.
I've actually heard about that. The grade who sells the most gets like a prize, right?
Points.
There you go. Team points.
Right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's going very well. So
Good.
it's gonna be great.
Well, what about that market thing? Is that you?
Yeah, we had a meeting about it last week. I think I'm not. Yeah, you want.
Is it
I'm
hush
not
hush?
Sure.
It's not, no, they're going to do a spring market like they have on Main Street during the summer, but student council is going to be hosting it here in the school, so local vendors and artisans and things it's going to be used as a fundraiser for student council to be able to bring in speakers.
So it's like a December delight, except in the
Times
spring.
3.
Except in the spring.
Right.
So yeah, that's gonna be good.
I don't have any committee comments, but I do have a request for the committee through the chair, and maybe we wait till Jen's back, but I did email Jen and have a conversation to bring this forward, that on our April 4th school committee meeting, there is a film that is being aired, Most Likely to Succeed. It's a documentary that was made by Tony Wagner and Ted Dintersmith. It talks about the education in the United States. and I'm halfway through the book. I do read, Dr. Buckley, although I've been reading it for months. But it is fascinating, and it really brings up some very provocative comments and thoughts. I personally would love to see the school committee and our administration. I know we can't ask anybody to go, but I think it's going to be airing at Dreamland. It is unfortunately because of Tony Wagner's schedule. They have to start it at 6 p.m. On the night of our school committee. So I would ask the school committee through the chair if we would consider meeting an hour early that night, and then possibly putting a light agenda. So if we choose to attend, and our staff choose to attend, that we could get there in a timely manner.
Yeah, yeah. I think Peter just raised the fact that if town meeting isn't finished on the 1st, but I think it would be done by then.
By the 4th? Yeah.
Yeah. But
But with that,
We can put the dress code and homework on for that day, too. No, I think that's very reasonable.
sure.
I mean, we can, Jen is in here, so we can go crazy. So why don't we try and get together a light agenda so that we're able to attend?
I can do
okay,
that.
and move it up to
Yep.
5.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Great,
Thank
thank you.
Melissa,
Yeah, sounds great.
any thoughts?
None.
Okay.
Lots, but she doesn't want to share.
So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
That's the one book one I have, and it's really interesting.